Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Ludum Dare 48 post party. What's got you two so tickled then?
I saw a funny clown outside.
They are very funny, aren't they, clowns?
They are funny, aren't they, clowns?
Funny guys.
Funny jokers. Oh, lordy.
Right.
It's a lovely looking splash you got behind cameras there.
Oh, thank you. I made it myself.
I feel like, so Fishy Lake, because I don't really remember how this game came out, did it end up being this like really cool black and white game in the end?
I think the black and white stylization might be the best thing about it. I think that might be its real redeeming quality is that nice grayscale sort of feel together on there.
Yeah, it would have been really cool. Really tied it together. I'm really glad that we went with that in the end. And
it's not. Is
it? No dumb idiot with no graphical training convinced us away from it. She's such a nice splash.
It's a nice little scene, that.
Yeah, it was.
Have you guys recovered from Ludum Dare 48 then?
Yeah.
Thrills and excitement and lack of sleep. Not really lack of sleep, is it?
Yeah, I was pretty done at the end of it, as we know.
Nobody
went to bed about 1 minute after 2.
Yeah, I woke up at like 2:30 or something the next day.
Oh, that's right, because we were gonna like chill and decompress with some VR games, and we were both like, yeah, well, we've got up until about 5, so that's ages. And then played one mission of Star Trek Bridge Simulator left.
There were technical difficulties. We'll blame it on that.
It was good though.
Difficulties. So how do we want to structure this out? I always forget what we do with this when we do our postmortems. I guess normally we're doing them hot off the back so we can discuss, usually I would say, the things we like about the final product and dislike about the final product, the things we liked about our work process and things we didn't like about our work process, and then maybe talk about where this stacks up relative to our other projects, which and the strengths and the weaknesses, and then also just like favorite bits. I just like to say my favorite bit was teleport the fish to the. I'm still thinking about that. That's I think the moment that I knew I had cracked.
I was really trying to understand those few sentences.
It was a fucking fruitless effort, mate. I don't know what you were expecting to find. It mean anything, did it?
Yeah, so I think usually we would start kind of with a playthrough and then get chatting about the game. I want to suggest that perhaps that's not the way we do Fishy Lake. Because Fishy Lake can't really be played through in the traditional sense. And I think we should... What was that, Will?
Technically, there is an end game state.
But can it be reached?
I know.
Who knows?
I know at least one person has won, because someone has sent me a WhatsApp message with the end splash, and they were like, you redeemed yourself with this dumb little joke at the end splash.
Wow, okay. Well, all right.
So I know you can win.
20-second coding with Will. Hell yeah.
It's pretty good, mate.
Someone else has proved that we can beat our game, but it was none of us.
We didn't
it was
check.
none of the developers. Jesus.
I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, genuinely really good. So you want to let's talk about just someone explain the game and what it is and what it was and the things that we didn't get in.
Sure.
I feel like with what it was makes a far more sense.
Okay, yeah.
To finish that thought, though, I think it's definitely worth explaining why the playthrough is going to be as not coherent as it normally would be, because there are things that didn't go as well in Fishy Lake as have in previous LDs, and I think we hit those first, and then we'll kind of show the game and talk through it a little bit. But yeah, do you want to?
I guess for the sake of the future archaeologists of us looking back at this one, we did not get this one done to the way we thought we were going to. We ended up missing a lot of features and making a kind of a different game as a result. I think it's a fair assessment.
We made one component that was supposed to be an afterthought the entire game. We did.
It's not an unfair assessment. We'll talk about the failings. The game we ended up making. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. From what I understand, it's basically a.
Sorry, that's not a good way to start talking about a game you made. Now, I might be wrong.
I haven't played it.
But my best understanding of the game I just made is.
I know the game we were trying to make, and then we got so many features. I'm just going to say I don't know exactly.
Sure.
I don't actually know if there's a win condition. I think the win condition is don't get any bugs, right? Don't you always win if the game doesn't crash?
Yeah.
Survive for 7 days.
Survive for 7 days against an onslaught of bugs.
Don't fracture the oh so brittle silver thread of a gameplay loop in there before the.
It's actually wild as well. Okay, let me break down actually what it is, because it's really funny if you break down like some of the decisions we made early on make no sense now. So there are 5 distinct screens in the game, 3 of which are just a walk up a path, which would have been good for narrative and mood in the initial, except now it is just a regular. There's no reason to have any of that opening area.
Other than to make walking back to the car take longer.
You didn't have to go. We could have just had a menu and the lake, and one of the bits on the menu says "Go home." But instead of that,
in the context of the game, or just go home. Don't
just go home. It's not worth being
quiet.
So you arrive at the lake, Fishy Lake or whatever. You arrive at this lake in your Ford F-150 with two presents in the back, which sort of implies to me that this is sometime around Christmas. There are 2 little gifts in the back of the van, and you're going to return them to your wife and child. On the way there, you decide that you need a 7-day non-stop fishing break. So you go.
I'm liking the headcanon here.
You go into a shop and there's a very bouncy man called Harry who every day greets you. It's kind of Groundhog Day. Every day greets you with the same monotonous phrase explaining the controls. He has a bag and you have a bag. What this means will become apparent later.
Will it?
You then move on to the lake, arguably the core area of our game, which is the area with the least camera and asset control, for sure. It is a sort of loosely top-down view of a flat surface and a water shader that is quite nice, but it's not rendered very well as a result of the camera and lighting. You can go to the edge of the lake and engage with is sort of our core mechanic, which probably, again, I think we can talk about this one at length, probably shouldn't have necessarily been what I would consider the core feature, but I guess it is our core interaction mechanic, which is the fishing minigame. The fishing minigame is some pretty cool things happen in it, like, because I didn't see that bit that much because I was working on everything outside of that. Like when I saw like the casting of the line and stuff, like it looks kind of sick.
Yeah.
Some parts of the game work really well. I think the sound and animation and mise en scène of a lot of that game is actually really cool, and some of the mechanics feel like they are the beginnings. It's like a prototype for a better game, which I think is kind of neat. You fish with this mini game where you have to basically keep these fish that are trying to battle their way out of a ring and bring them towards you. It's quite. When you do that, you get a fish. It's in your bag, and then you can go and sell it to Harry, who greets you with the same phrase, "Welcome to the lake," every day. Even if you've arrived from the lake, even if you've been here for 6 days. Then you return home at the end of that day, and it tells you how much money you made for the day. And at the end of that, none of it mattered, and you win.
Quiet.
Yeah, I think that's a good description of the game.
It's probably worth mentioning at this point then what the original premise of the game was meant to be, what the pitch.
You go ahead.
Was. Fishy Lake was not an idea born of LD. This has been discussed before. It follows in the vein of games like Pony Island. And a bit of maybe Frog Fractions. There's 1 or 2 others that are escaping me now. I don't know if you can name any others like this, but
like the Doki Literature Club.
Yeah. Yes. It's a game that presents itself as one thing, but is actually something else. It's also got a bit of the kind of Witness idea of it's a game that you could happily play and never discover quite a major part of what makes it what it is. So the original pitch is it's a game that is a fishing simulator or like a fishing mini game, something that feels kind of like a Just a happy, quirky, like farming simulator or farming sim type fishing game, something that might be from Harvest Moon or Animal Crossing or that kind of thing. And you could totally play it as that and have a satisfying experience just with some casual fishing. But if you start deciding to kind of mess with the mechanics and using the emergent gameplay that comes from the interaction of mechanics, you can start discovering some weird, dark secrets about what's going on at the lake. And it turns out that Harry at the bait and tackle shop has actually been feeding people to the Cthulhu monster that lives at the bottom of the lake. And none of that is explicitly told to the player. It's all clues that you can get and try and it's all implied by the game, and you can try and work out what you think is actually going on. That's the pitch.
To be fair, it was all pretty well fleshed out in terms of story beats. Like, it was all achievable. I think we would have got that story across had we achieved all of the story beats we were going for.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that does bring us to the fact that we didn't.
Yes, that's correct.
Fair summary of what we achieved.
Shall we talk about where we think we got tripped up?
Sure.
I guess it was a scoping issue, first and foremost, but if something doesn't get completed, it is almost definitionally an issue of overscoping. Yeah. I do think it does. I think there are two factors to me that led to the overscoping issue. One of them is probably that it being an existing idea that we talked about in large conversation, sweeping conversation, and us having an idea of the big version of it was probably not very helpful to distill what the smallest version of it is. I think we sort of started arriving at what that would be, probably like nearing the end of day 2, we were like, here's the minimum we need. And we did not lay out an MVP minute 1. Because if we had, we might have been able to task it out a little bit better. And I think like when you and I were talking about it originally, Matt, and it was like there's like 3 different areas on this lake.
Yep.
There's maybe like a town that you can like, there's someone that arrives and that like heralds news or something. There's these loose like maybe chat interactions. And then obviously we knew we weren't going to do all of that. But I don't think we drilled down to what is the tiniest possible version of this game beyond asset-wise. I think I had a good idea early on, maybe like this is the areas that you will go to, and that is it.
Yeah. Like
getting the shop into a menu and saying there's no indirect, but we got that bit done quite well. But then like getting the whole structural loop of like, okay, how do you fucking win? Like if we have to have at least 2 win states, one, didn't find it out, one worked it out, maybe even 3 win states. How do we get to them hyper minimally? Because I think for a game jam, to like have a game with multiple endings is already kind of absurd. And like if we were going to do that, I think we needed to really drill down to like, well, what's the very small thing we can make then that we can get 3 endings out of?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other thing, sort of 1B, is that kind of thing that Will was saying, I think the thing that I was saying most of the time, is that the fishing mechanic was big enough to have been its own Ludum Dare entry. If we all just drilled into that, I think the 3 of us could have made a good fishing game with that mechanic, where you just sell fish pretty easily. And ultimately, that is kind of what we ended up making, albeit with weird accoutrement on the outside and this like day-night cycle and and a lot of bugs because we weren't all looking at that at the same time. But if we just been like, shall we make it a fishing game? This is the core mechanic, and then there's buying and selling and upgrading your rod or whatever. We could have done that. And instead we were like, that's a small part of it, and then we're going to add this whole nebulous, undecided branching dialogue stuff as well.
I think our key problem was that there was one sentence that we said right at the very start, and I was thinking about this the other day. We said, how about we make it so someone can play this and just think it's a fishing game?
Yeah.
That specific moment in time is what tripped us all up, because we were thinking this needs to be a fully fledged fishing game. It needs to play as a fishing game. And then we put all this extra stuff on top. Realistically, all the extra stuff on top would have been all of our time anyway.
I think that's super true. I think a game like that is really tough to make work. I mean, I've never seen a jam game where that's the case. And I think that, the reason being is sort of like you don't have bonus content in jam games, right? There isn't an asset you model that you shouldn't be putting in forefront for people to see, because you only got time to say, hey, Will, that's all right, cry it out, mate. Because you only have time to make like 10 assets, right? And then building a game out of fewer than that is hard. So. And I do agree that, like, ultimately, I think that is still the best version of what Fishy Lake is. We were never going to be able to do that for the jam, and I don't think we knew it at the time, realistically.
No. I think we overestimated the value of the third person being me, we overestimated the me factor. I guess going into it, I thought I was going to be doing a lot more of the game dev, and then I ended up spending all of my time doing assets and sound design.
We could have split it up a little more. I think maybe if we'd been in a genre that you were more immediately familiar with, and you didn't feel like there was going to be a research period, you could have dropped in on like a top-down whatever, right? Like because you've been in that space. Because like the thing that I was thinking we'd split dev with would probably be like handle the inventory sorting code, and that's so fresh to you, right? Like that wouldn't have been the kind of thing you could have comfortably dived in on. So yeah. And then beyond all of that as well, excuse me, I think the way we structured the game out early on, probably by having not properly decided what all of the elements were that quickly, sorry, so noisy about my fucking flat today, meant that it was really hard for us all to simultaneously work on the project, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know what weird bugs we ran into with being in a new version of Unity and the render pipeline stuff and all having pink textures and then a memory leak issue and then like, the stylizer wasn't playing with URP.
All of the memory leaks and the pink shaders. No problem in the end.
It wasn't a problem. It didn't matter. We solved it. No. And I think also, maybe if I were to go back and change one thing, I think I wouldn't spend 7 full hours arguing with Will about the merits of black and white.
I feel like we were doing other things while we argued.
I wasn't. I turned my keyboard off every time and I was like,
we could. So, with regards to the black and white issue, I still don't think it should have been a black and white game.
You're so stupid.
The problem is, at the start, like, I was like, okay, I'll go and make some assets. It wasn't like, okay, what am I making it look like? I didn't ask that question. No. I didn't know what I was going off and making. I was just going, because game jam, you don't have time to ask.
No, it's so true. And then that's why I always rely on post-processing in jams to start tying the aesthetic together, because you're just like, you've got to be able to compile a load of scrappy stuff in, unless you have one dedicated, often like pixelized, right? Like we're doing 3D assets. Like a lot of the time when I do 3D in my regular job, like I'm also pulling tons of free shit and stuff. Like I'm not modeling everything from scratch with an aesthetic style. If you're like mastering a project in full 3D, you don't have the time. You need a team of people with an art director to make that kind of thing work in the real world. So. But yeah, I think that was that's my read on what the benefits and the failings were. And if you'll kind of excuse me for 1 second.
Of course.
But yeah, what you were talking about, where you said you thought you'd be doing a lot more game dev. I also thought you'd be doing a lot more game dev, and I think one of the places where we maybe lost ground was the split between programming and art.
Yeah,
and it's unfortunate how this happened, because I think I take a lot of responsibility on this one, because how you split the coding for a game like this up potentially between 2 devs is for one person to start on the inventory things and one person to start with the fishing game. And I have just avoided doing UI in Unity like the plague, because Niz is good at it and I hate it. Meaning I would have to do the fishy game, and then you're also you've not got much experience in Unity, so you also would probably want to be doing the fishy game. Meaning I was the only person on programming and we had 2 people on art, and I think the split between how much time went into those 2 things was not necessarily ideal.
And I think in terms of once we'd got the basic fishing mechanics down, we then spent like 3 hours or 4 hours getting it working in the main scene, because it had been developed in a separate scene. Like, I think it's all just because it's things we've never done before, and planning for that. Okay, I'm going to make something that you can just pick up and plop anywhere and it'll just work. Yeah. Like, that's not easily done. It's not straightforward, and it's not the mind space that you normally do a Unity project in. You have your scene, you make one scene, and that's your game. It's how most people come up do Unity games.
I'll say also, like with me and Matt having done the last 2 projects in Unity, and like we've done a lot of this stuff together before anyway. And I remember thinking when we did Waver, one of the things I was saying, actually probably even doing buried things, but probably especially Weber, one of the things I was saying is we worked out our flow really well so that neither of us ever covered the same ground or like overlapped, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of the reasons that Weber came out super polished. And I remember like, if you look at the post-mortem for that, it's just me and you being like, God, we worked really well together. Like there was just no dead time. And then on this project, probably because there was 3 of us and probably because what we were doing was a little too nebulous from the get-go, there was so much stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah.
Like that was probably, there were like probably in the midst of me having high energy segments where there was an hour where I just couldn't really be that productive because I was out of the scene, or like someone else, you know, like I'm moving some stuff around and, you know, Matt's got the inventory system like sort of done. It's like, but when this is done, like we're gonna have to spend 3 hours hooking it up in the main scene and like finding the space, like there's got to be references that we've got to pull in, and like it doesn't really make sense to develop this here and spend an hour on it here when realistically it would only take 5 minutes to develop them.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was great.
Just to take a step back as well and actually kind of explain what we mean here for anyone who didn't see this happening or hasn't done Unity stuff.
Shit. Yeah.
The Unity has collab features. When you make changes, you can push them, everyone receives those, and everyone's versions stay up to date. But Unity, you work in scenes, which are kind of like levels or stages in which you can make stuff, and 2 people can't really be editing the same scene at the same time because those changes conflict with each other. It's almost like 2 parallel universes that come crashing together, and the differences between them don't mesh, and you just lose changes from one of those people. Our game worked almost entirely in one scene. And we were fine on day 1 because we were all, like Will said, doing our own little things in our own little scenes. And as soon as it came time to like thread those together, it felt like a pile up on a motorway. Like you say, there were just periods way too long as to be acceptable for LD where we couldn't be productive because someone else was working in the scene. And I think that's definitely one of the biggest lessons I will take from this LD is try and make your game not have to all take place in one scene. Or
do
some
something
research into
loosely
scene
modular
additives as well.
Even
Additives, or just like start working with things like exclusively prefabbed out.
Yeah.
Like I remember for While Alive, for example, that was all in one scene, right? But I did the menu canvas, and a lot of that work, granted it wasn't like was stuff that I could give you as a prefab, having not fucked with it, and I knew like it's just not relying on anything intrascenally. So like you do have to plug this into stuff, but we were going to have to anyway. Again, it wasn't doubled work. I didn't plug it in to test it and then give it to you. Yeah. I gave you the raw version, and the first time I ever got plugged in was in the correct place.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the biggest problems was we didn't prefab things and then drop them in. That would have been the way to get it working. Like get fishing working, get the menu working, and then make that into a prefab and drop it into another scene, just another test scene, and see if it works in another scene. But we didn't do that. We were like, let's get it and plop it into the main scene just to see if it works. Then when we finally got it working, it was like, well, it works now, don't fiddle with it. And we did that merge way too early, which meant me and you were kicked out. We couldn't do anything in the main scene. Character controller code also was like, I'd done that in a separate scene, but once it was working in the main scene, you really don't want to fiddle with it elsewhere because there are things that have changed. It was
like we had like the moving around and walking and plugging in animations happened pretty smoothly, and then while I went to then set up the rest of how that worked in the main scene, you had to do the fishing bit and make it so that the fishing animations worked, and all of a sudden we were basically like branching out on 2 prefabs again. It's just such a bad workflow.
Yeah,
I think it would be kind of fun to break down without making like, how could we have done it in time? Because I don't think it is not possible to have done it in time. Some points, I mean, on beginning of day 3, I really felt like we were going to get it done. And actually, I think the reason I was naive about that is I didn't realize how unfinished the core fishing mechanic was at that point. Because I hadn't looked at it. I thought that was, it was done on day 1, and really it was just, typed up on, like, ready to go on day 1, but we were going to have to test it and whatever. But I can imagine a way in which this would have worked. So, like, I think if the fishing mini game, even if it had been the exact same fundamental mechanics, had been something where you go into like another scene where like it just does like a wipe to black and then a wipe onto a new scene where at the beginning of like you don't see your guy, you just see like and it goes boom, and then you bring a fish to you or whatever. Someone could just make effectively the fishing game as a thing that when you go up to the edge of the lake and you press space to fish, we just fade to black and you're doing the fishing minigame.
Yeah.
That kind of thing would have helped so much.
Then
we'd have been on 2 separate paths.
Yeah. Then in a separate scene, you're doing, so like you've got your story character development, everything in one scene. The guy moving around, the guy talking to people, guy picking things up and having a look at them. That's all super straightforward things that would have made sense to be one person's whole job. Then fade to black, straight into another scene for this whole thing that someone else has been working on and has got polished just on their own, just working on that one bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of that just being thrown in assets that the third person had been making would have just made sense.
I
exactly. And then,
sorry, you go, Miss.
No, I was just saying, like, the thing that you have with something like that is you also can get two different types of MVPs out of scenes like that. So if the MVP for the walking around scene, which I think is kind of what we did get, it's like, well, it's fixed camera and there's just 3 shots or whatever. You can whittle that down, or we could have eventually gone full 3D, full camera control, orbital camera control, maybe why not? And then, like, the fishing minigame itself, you could go, okay, there's a version where there's no character model that you see. You just, there's just like a fishing rod in the air floating, and then you see it cast a line. And then later on, if we want to, we can unify and bring in our character and do character animations. You allow that kind of abstraction when you're working in two quite different, it's the top-down camera is completely fixed, and it's actually a 2D game. It's not even a 3D game. No 3D mesh is required. Like, you can imagine that being a very simple way to split that workload.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember an exchange that happened pretty early on, probably in day one, where I asked something about where things were going, and you said, "Oh, we're just doing it all in one scene, right?" And in hindsight, like neither of us knew at the time, and now we would definitely know in the future. Mm-hmm. In that conversation, the answer should be, No. No, we're not doing it all in one scene. That's going to go very badly. And it's a shame.
Doing it all in one scene isn't a problem.
It's how we've done our last 2 good projects also.
As long as everything is just something you can plop in, then it would have all worked. Like, if the player prefab that did the walking around was like its own thing, and then the fishing thing was just like a little thing you plop onto the player, and then that does its own thing, basing all things off where the player stood and stuff. Like, if we'd got it so you could just plop any one of the things into any scene and it had just worked, then
you could have done it.
We wouldn't have spent like 4 hours all waiting for each other to debug bits in our own code that we didn't understand.
To do that, I think we would have had to have like a proper like mechanical hour-long, 2-hour-long at the beginning, being like, okay, what do I need to, like, how are we going to structure out blank? Because then I know how to make an additive for blank. Like, usually you can start doing that maybe after a day, and people are like, okay, here's all of the empty slots you can basically plug stuff into. I do think the reason that, because like While Alive was in one scene, Waver was, other than the menu, in one scene, and it worked fine. I think the reason that this one, in hindsight, the clue, if we were doing something like this next time, is that there are 2 fundamentally different games happening. Yeah. And there's no reason for them to be in one scene. Like, there's no reason the fishing game has to be in the same scene as the walking around bit. It's fluid, but who gives a fuck? Like no one gives you extra points for it being an unbroken sequence. And actually, most games don't do that. They do have their mini games being so explicitly removed from the outside bit, so that, like, it doesn't matter if the scenery gets in the way. Like, you've always got a guaranteed good experience with the minigame, regardless of like how the art ends up turning out or whatever. So I do think, at that point, maybe we should have gone, if we're going to do walking around, shopping, and thingy, they should be 3 distinct scenes, and there's 3 people, and actually each one of us should just try and handle one of those things. And I think something like that would be a good way to do it.
Every time you say the words, but also new scene.
Yeah. That's a good breakdown.
I think there is also something to be said for the fact that our team just is 50% bigger. There is just more waiting time based on that. But what you were saying, Will, about like you should, if you prefab it all out, that is a way of making a single scene work. That is what I was doing with my fishing mechanics. Like, everything I was dropping in from the mini fishing game into the main scene was prefabbed out, and there are still. If the code I was writing was particularly good, then maybe this isn't the case. But there were still a lot of like integration problems with that, just from code weirdness or having to re-reference things in inspectors, or things being in the way and having physics that I wasn't experiencing in my scene. So I was still messing with like some weird bugs, like all the fish fucking off to the middle of the world, which wasn't happening in my scene, and those things just being like these completely.
I feel like we need a highlight reel of that, just like mass exodus, pissing off in the same direction. They're all going to World Zero. Why are they doing this? Yeah, I think the reason I found it really frustrating was because when I've gone back and restarted doing Latvian Milk, and I have this phobia of setting things in the editor because I know I'm so distractible. I'll forget to set it, and then I'll run around in circles trying to work out why it's not been set. Most of the things I design now just go off and find that thing with the tag at runtime, and they're like, we'll just use that.
Yeah, doing stuff like that can help for sure. I mean, I think it would just be so easy to do this now with hindsight. This is this is one. It almost didn't feel overscoped. I do think that there is a degree of overscoping probably with the whole we're going to have to be very heavy-handed with some of the stuff that arrived because it felt closer to me. Actually, the reason I think we ended up not getting it in was ultimately there was a lot more bug fixing that needed to happen than I thought there would be. Because I don't actually think mechanically at the beginning of day 3, if you can catch a fish and put it in your bag, you can also catch a bottle. And we wrote out that little five steps that you need to do. And it really did feel like that could have been achievable. But then we ran into problems with the actual central fishing mechanic, the shop being something that we just hadn't necessarily thought through that much. Then also what's something else that I remember just really slowing down. Oh yeah, sorting out where the inventory goes and me trying to build those spaces in real world and not really understanding how things were hooked up. And also I was just tired. I gotta be honest. I was lower energy this gen than I have been in the past ones. Day 1, I remember thinking I'm pretty zonked. I haven't got that much life in me.
I would like to just quickly call out. I know we've been pissing all over the fishing mini game here. That inventory system where everything snaps into place, fucking dope as hell. So good.
Yeah, you got the two central mechanics at the same time, so it was inevitable that we were going to break them.
Yeah.
Can we play it?
Dragging and dropping in the rotating shit. It feels right. It's what it should have felt like. It went really well. Yeah.
And
it was close, Kings.
There was some very hacky stuff going in there as well, because I didn't even want to deal with Z-axis offsets, so the items that you're dropping into the menu literally just half intersect the squares that they're sat on. Half of those objects is behind it, but it doesn't matter because of the view.
It doesn't matter because it's effectively 2D.
It's a game jam. You hide your crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's one of the things, Adam Savage from Mythbusters, he used to be a prop maker, and he was like, you've got to learn that what you're making is going to be displayed as this little tiny picture on a screen.
Yeah.
So you just don't do things that people aren't going to see.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we as a group struggle with that.
Yeah, you get excited, don't we?
But yeah, there's definitely a positive spin that I want to put on this because it was worth attempting, and you're saying, Will, what got done is very cool. It's just a shame that the cool things that we got done just don't quite hang together, is unfortunately. And we didn't get to everything. But I'm glad that we tried to make this one. It wasn't a ridiculous idea. It was possible. It was within reason. But let's give it a go.
Give it a play, and then I want to do it after we do a play. I do want to just go through all the things that I think work well, because I think we've shat on basically our own work experience pretty hard.
Yeah.
And as a result, we know that the game is a bit broken and not what we wanted to do. But if we just assess this game now, critically as its own piece of art, I think there's genuinely a lot of praise to say.
Definitely.
We didn't do fucking nothing. I mean, you go on the Ludum Dare website. There's some fucking garbage on there. We are not in the garbage pile. We are very clearly in the unfinished pile.
Yes.
But that's it, right?
Even from game 1, we were never in the garbage pile.
That's true, and it's pretty amazing what you got done in LD1. Will.
Yeah, LD1 Will's game jam.
What we did in game jam 1 is we gravely underscoped and way over delivered.
I mean, that was Waver as well. White Alive, I don't know how we did that one, honestly, because that was overscoped.
That was it. That was all. That was our game. That's all we'd come up with. And then it meant everything else was so polished after that. It just felt really good.
Yeah.
I think that probably going forward is what you want to be doing. You want to be underscoping so that you can add that extra layer of ooh.
Totally agree. Next game we do, it'll be a micro idea. And the micro ideas have been the ones that have worked really well, in my opinion. Waver, I think, still stands out as maybe our best jam entry. I mean, I would hope so. It's the one we developed into a real game.
I actually don't know about that. I wonder whether, as a jam entry, While Alive was the better of
I
the
think
two.
While Alive
While
is
Alive.
definitely a better concept, but I think Waver we just delivered so hard.
While Alive was the Babber's Hue of game jams.
So I can
Wait,
see.
it was
Actually, Baba Is You is a game
Oh,
jam
Babbitt
game.
you.
What's it?
Yeah, it was. What was it? There's one more thing I wanted to say before we jumped in. My favourite thing that came out of this jam, other than this wonderful game, is that there are 2 games I really want to make now. The RC car racing game.
So much. I've been thinking about that all day.
I've been thinking about it a lot. It sounded so good. And the game where you climb up a bunch of objects into the sky, plus the truck with falling objects.
Cluster junk.
Plus the junk, exactly. All right, let's go.
All right, the game should be on screen. I don't know if you guys are watching the stream, but you can.
I'm watching
Yeah,
the stream now.
I won't put this onto Discord. Feel free to just watch
Yeah,
it.
audio.
You will on the stream. Yeah. You should.
All right.
I'll be a little behind.
Can you hear
The sound
us?
of this intro was so good. I've got it muted because I'm talking.
You should kind of hear me walking around. I know that's kind of quiet, but okay. So here we are, Fishy Lake. We start next to the van, and if we head over here, I've just noticed actually, because this was still in day 3, he was still holding his fishing rod here. I've just realised.
Yeah, I fixed that up
We have
nice and
actually
quick.
got
He
rid of
only,
that now.
yeah, he holds his rod only at the lake. I gotta say, just like already immediately, this game looks kind of sick.
I didn't
Like it's
even
actually
notice.
very pretty.
Yeah, it is, to be fair. That's you with your lovely environment design. Oh, sorry, I talked all over the transition of footstep noises.
To the nice wooden.
AKA the greatest moment in the game. Genuinely my favourite thing in the game. No, well, you did tons of good shit.
All right, so this is the shop. We've got nothing to sell just yet, so we'll head to the lake.
There were some little things you guys were saying on the last day. Can you go back to the shop for a second? Because there are some things that you were saying on the last day to me that I did not register, even though they were such obviously good ideas. Like just having some writing, just pointing at that bit that says like drag here to sell. Like it's a fucking game jam game. Why would you not write the instructions on the screen? Like in my head, I just had this like holistic idea that wasn't like final product focused. But like there should be some instructions right here. Like Will did.
I
some
did think it
instructions
was
that-
slightly odd that you weren't. When I said you should probably write shop at like your inventory and shop here, and you were like, nah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
I don't know why. I had a fundamentally bad idea. You were correct to suggest it.
There were so many things in the last like 5 minutes because you two had just fucking pieced out.
I missed out a lot of time.
And I was like, Niz, which code is telling it what to say?
Honestly, like Mr. Nyers smoking a cigar, like it doesn't matter, Will.
But how do they know to go back to the car?
This game is kind of sick, dude.
I'm very proud of the water. You can't really see as good as it looks.
It's
but
a real shame because I did find a few angles where it looked sick through the filter also.
You can see the fish there now on full screen. I'm not used to seeing this full screen. Especially
that
when
little
it's-
extra tooltip text was another really good shout at the last
Yeah,
minute.
last 20 seconds. Of
I didn't
game.
even know that was there until I just saw it.
Alright,
That shader is
just
sick.
efficient.
Look at the foam on the shore.
No, genuinely really cool.
Yeah, it took me like 3 hours.
It was really good.
It reminds me of the Buried Things sand shimmer, where you gave me a very funny look when I started doing that right off the bat on that game. And then at the end we were like, that was a very good call to do that
That was
first.
the best bit.
And a very similar thing happened with this water shader. I think you and me both looked at Will like, that's going to take a while. We don't need a water shader. And then actually it looks fucking banging.
It's like the best bit.
So
Go ahead.
all of the fish in the lake are of the same kind. We have 3 kinds of fish made. And all of their stats are in the game. Did that break just then?
We can in a minute we can switch to my screen and I can show I can just share on Discord my Blender scene and we'll just show through some of the assets that didn't make it in.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, that's a good idea actually.
Because then we can talk through the story pieces that would have gone alongside them.
I think I fished too short here. I think I accidentally double clicked. Let's try that again. Has anyone had this bug?
And that's a hard restart, kids.
But we stuck.
My strength meter just doesn't go up, and I have no idea why.
Oh no! You know what? I did know that bug was in the game.
Oh, I've never seen this before.
Yeah, no, Alyssa mentioned that.
Did she?
Yeah, that's it. So that's how you have to play this game, unfortunately.
What?
Wait,
the
that's
strength just doesn't work?
No.
What?
Yeah.
It definitely worked the last time I
The
played.
fish will come to you. You just have to wait.
Wow.
Holy
Okay. Well, I might have balked my fishing because I kept cancelling out of it. I don't even know if that'll work anymore, but we'll try. There's some fish here.
Good try.
I don't understand what broke this. This worked for the whole 3 days.
Yeah, I agree. This was a surprise to me also.
Even back when it was an accordion.
Is there sound happening in the
We've got music and stuff.
VOD right now? So let's talk about one of the genuinely good bits. Harry's soundtrack fucking bangs.
So good.
Genuinely fantastic. Like, easily the best thing in our game, in my opinion. Some of the best work Harry's ever done, as far as I'm concerned. And it's for this.
Yeah, sort of a shame. I mean, you guys still love this game idea. I wouldn't be surprised if you come back to this. It's still a great idea.
I never come back to anything, but I do really like the idea. I agree. I think I should go back to project. It's not necessarily ideas, but...
if I was gonna come back to this though, I think it would be very different off the bat.
Yeah.
So it might feel like a very different game anyway, enough to warrant coming back to it. I don't know. But yeah, well, I tried to, at the very last minute, like an hour or two before end of project, tried to put some new fish spawners into the lake of the other fish types, and I don't know what happened. Let's fail a fish there. And I don't know, they just didn't work. I was just getting some weird, they weren't spawning in errors, and they work completely fine in my scene as prefabs, but as soon as you pop those prefabs into the scene, they just stop, and I couldn't tell you why.
So wild.
Yeah, didn't have time to bug fix it because this was like hours from the end. So they're all one type of fish, even though we have 3 species actually in the game. You can only grab one of them.
I mean, not that they were particularly great.
That's a nice different sizes of.
Variety is the spice of life.
Pressing space to rotate these in the menu brings up the tooltips from fishing. I've still got a strength meter there as well.
I don't think anyone was known to press space to rotate. It's like
you have a strength bar on screen. Yeah, then it's all strength bar on screen. Yeah.
When we left the debug mode in the build that we released because we'd had to roll back.
Is there music in the shop right now as well?
There is, yeah. There's radio music.
Oh,
He fucking smashed it. He put it in like swing time, re-instrumented. I actually think the sound in this game is pretty well done. Like there's a lapping of the lake as you get closer to the lake. I think the footsteps being material dependent is like doubles the value of the game. I think also some of the UI stuff is not terrible. This shop is kind of crap, but like having the backgrounds in there is nice. Like the clock at the top there, it's just switched over to nighttime now because you hit 6 p.m.
Like if you saw this on the Nintendo eShop for Nintendo Switch, you wouldn't be like, ugh.
No, you might just be like, yeah, this game must be bigger than I think it is, which it isn't in our instance, but...
Yeah, the getting the lake sounds to get louder as you walk towards the thing was another thing. I spent like 20 minutes just getting just right.
yeah. Well, to be fair, that's it's a tricky one, right? I really wanted more of this shit, you know?
Yeah.
And that's it. That's Fishy Lake, everybody.
Peace. Are you going to play through 7 days just so we see the ending credits that none of us have ever seen in game?
You pressed next day twice. Do we think we've skipped 2 days?
Is that
Yes.
timer going up faster because I did that?
It does look like it is, but that definitely shouldn't be happening.
You fired off the coroutine that puts the timer up twice.
Oh yeah, you totally have.
That was
That's a coroutine, so that absolutely is going twice as fast.
Do I want to like one-shot these buttons so they can... You're like, no, don't worry about it.
Well done on your $20, by the way. Don't do this, man. Man, this doesn't matter.
Okay, so if you get to midnight without having got back to your van, as we're about to see, you will pass out.
You passed out.
There we go.
What? That's the end of the game.
It is because he went through all 7 days quite quickly.
I didn't realise the screen went in. I thought it
Yeah,
was the
that
one that willed it.
literally like
No, I got him last minute, which is, again, I think, a very redeeming factor to this game.
So there you go. That is Fishy Lake. Let's bring us back here.
it did count the days up, but not so. We all know what the code is behind the scenes, and there's an integer that's being incremented every time you click that button. So it has counted the days up. Just that text doesn't change because that gets set on update.
Will, do you want to do the thing where you pull up some of the assets, or should someone want to crack open maybe the Unity project? Now, do you want to have a look at that and see the ones that made it in? Because there's a few things that made it in.
Yeah, it's probably again easy for me to do this on my end.
Yeah, definitely.
You do this on your end.
Do you have Blender installed?
No.
Oh no, they're in the project. You can just use Unity's little 3D model view.
There you go. Like we know what we're doing.
This will take a minute to launch. So
Yeah, so I want to just go over. I just want to go over the things that I think are cool there, because actually there's a lot of small things that are cool, and I think like the thing is the big thing we made is not good, and it's just not what we wanted to make basically. But the component parts of it, this is the reason that it felt like we were getting there. The component parts of it are good. The character model is good. The animations are good. The sound design is good. The environments are good. The music is good. Like the parabola when you cast your line, the actual like conceptual idea of the mini game, like it's all fucking good. Like that's good shit. Like the tiny little deal, that water shader, Will, is sick. Like you did genuine. Like there's nothing in that game that I'm like we had to cheap out on blank, with the exception of the shop screen that I did. I was not happy with that.
It was ultimately the absolute correct decision, and I still think it looks stylistically fitting. I don't think it's
It
wrong.
looks okay. Yeah,
I quite like that
it's just
shot
rushed.
screen.
I think the fact that like Harry doesn't change. Like I did that drawing of Harry in about a minute, and like I did 4 drawings of Harry that are in the project. You can see where he slowly degrades into a fish man, and like there was just like there were loads of little things that I did. Like that was like one brush on a fucking one layer. There's a lot of things there that I think we did pretty well. Like when you booted up the game, and like the little thing where you press space at the beginning and you hear the seatbelt unbuckle, and like it's cool. And then you're kicked into a scene that I think is very pretty, with some really nice fixed cameras and like just some decent like mystery to it. Mm-hmm. Like we basically did the game that we wanted to make. We started making it in the exact right way. Like the reason that this works less now is because we didn't make that game. So a lot of it feels like wasted, or like it isn't quite working. Like Harry had ideas to do variants on that main theme, where it slowly got more and more discordant. And one of the ones was, there's that bit where the guitar just goes like dum da da dum da dum da dum. He was going to increase that by a bar every day, so like it just gets more. And like there's a flute note that goes dum da da, and that note was going to slowly detune by like 10 cents and like last another second. And there was some parts of that. It's like we're so going in the right direction with this.
Yeah.
Like we started building a really fucking cool version of this game. We just didn't finish. Like it's just an unfinished project. That's what I mean. Like it's clearly that 3 people did a good job and did not finish.
Yeah.
Slow flagellation over.
Yeah, I think honestly, like looking at it, I forget that a lot of it is sick. I think aesthetically it came together. I think all of the core mechanics are fundamentally correct. We got in the box inventory. The fishing minigame has like value to it, like it is not boring. Which I actually, and again, looking back, you and I both said, well, I think you would make it boring because that would help us finish the game. But realistically, this is better than what you would have done with just like a mache to pull up the fish. It's just, and so I think like a lot of what is here works well. It's just very very cool. The fact that you can just rush through all 10 days by just mashing next day is a bit of a clue that we didn't know what we were doing at the end there, and that like you always make the same amount of money every day, and there's no like you make $20 today, only $100 to go. It's just you made $20 today. I think actually it's kind of a shame that screen used to say, I used to be like, there's 2 things we should indicate: how much money you made today, and then like little sneaky descriptions. So it would say like you found a strange message in a bottle today. And like, oh, okay. And then originally in that in the canvas by default, it said you made $10 today, you found nothing of note. And I do kind of regret that we didn't just leave that in because you never do. You never find anything of note.
That's good. That should be in.
I actually, listening to that back, the that I kept saying while we were doing it, that level of frisson that you get when something happens and you're like, that's exactly what should have happened there. Like, press space. That little bit of sound design that I did, which was a mashup of a load of stuff off free sound, of like car door slamming and stuff like that, and then he appears next to his car. Like, it makes sense. It feels right. And I think that level of polish is like what we were aiming for on everything, which is why we didn't manage to get it all in. And then ultimately, in order to get a gameplay loop that we could put on the internet, like, we just had to cut everything out.
Yeah. And I think also part of what makes your game good is the attention to small details. Like the fact that when you boot up the game, it doesn't just say press space to start, and then there's no sound effects, and then we just do a cut to that sequence, is proof that like we know how to make video games. And I think like a lot of making video games isn't just finishing tasks. It's like, okay, you're also trying to make like some kind of artistic statement with everything you're doing. So if you'll make like that opening, where I would have been fun to do a better animation at the beginning or something, like slow fades or whatever, so that you can see that something is happening while you hear it. Like it was just, it's so dynamically like you've just arrived and something is happening. And I think that you're seeing in the Ludum Dare comments already, people are like, oh, I couldn't crack the mystery, because we've implied a good mystery. Like we started out doing the right thing. Like it feels like something's under the surface. It's weird that you run to that weird shack and there's just that guy, and like we're getting the right vibe. We just didn't quite smash it.
Yeah. I think with the sounds, I was actually in my head. I was thinking, what can we get the most value out of? And like a blank screen with just sound effects, the player is imagining everything. You're getting all of that detail for free. You're just inventing that in their mind. Yeah. So then when it fades to the scene, they've already built that entire intro for you in their head. It's all those little things is what I was trying to do.
It's full Kuleshov effect almost. Like it's, you know, we give you some sound and then we give you an image and you connect up what happened. And like the idea also, it's kind of cool to like arrive in media res, right? Like I think there's almost more value to like if you started driving the car and then parked it, it would just be like, okay, whatever. Hearing that you've just parked the car and arrived, like it sets your scene. Like we give you the bounds of your world a little bit. We make it seem like it's quite claustrophobic all of a sudden. Like there's some good elements to that. I do think we had the right ideas.
So the Unity project, I think, is pretty much up and running here.
I thought you were going to say it's totally broken.
So we can go and have a look through some files. Maybe one last question just before we start looking at this for you, Will, because Niz and I have done the last. Is this our sixth LD now? Seventh LD? Seventh, right? Kind of 2 ages of LD.
Thritch.
Yeah, it's 7.
Buried Things, Waver, Wildlife List.
Yeah. And the very first one of those we did was with Will. Niz and I have done various ones since, and this one is, of course, the return of Will.
Return of the King.
Yeah, baby.
So, how did you find it, having been 6 years since the last LD?
I actually felt like I'd come home. It's genuinely been so pleasant. Like I've spent the last 5 years, like, because I did that first LD was pre-uni, and I went to uni, and all I got to think about was everything I was doing at uni and all of that nonsense. It's all so serious, and you're just going to be professional all the time. It's just so nice to come back to just fucking about and making something daft with no consequences because you're doing it for fun. Like I absolutely adored it for that value. I really enjoyed it. It's just why at the last minute I was like, we've got to put something up. I was like, please,
I need this. Man, Matt, like whatever. We're winners. We don't need this garbage.
But like, coming back to it, like seeing how much better you guys are at everything. Because last time it was like, how do we do this? It was like, I don't know. Like, frantically googling to being like, this. How do I do this?
I swear. I think when we did the first jam, you were like, how'd you format a for loop? And I'm like, what the fuck is a for loop? I don't know what that is.
None of us do anything. Like all I'd done is like programming Arduino, and I was like, yeah, I can code. This will be fine.
Yeah, I'd done like some YouTube thumbnails in pixel art, and I was like, I'd do the whole game.
I think that naivety just totally paid off in the end, because it was like, let's do this, and it wasn't, no, we probably can't do that. That sounds difficult. Everything sounded difficult. so we just put it in.
I honestly think, to a degree, Will, I'm only saying this now because you just made me sappy when you said you'd come on. But I actually think I might owe quite a lot of where I am today to the fact that we did that jam. Because we did so well, it made me think that I should do it. Because when you try something and you are not good at it, you don't often go back, right? Like you try and find the things that you're naturally good at. And I don't know if any of us I think we got lucky. I think you are actually specifically, Will, naturally good at this. I don't even know that I was. I think, and then on top of that, I think we got lucky and we scoped right by accident. And we did a lot of the good things that we now know to do from experience by accident the first time. But like the fact that worked was probably one of the reasons I was like, I should totally go into game dev. Like it's fucking easy. It's not, but like it turns out you can make some good shit. Like,
it's not the actual implementing stuff in the game that is difficult. Like, no. Yes, they're the technical things that you run around in circles and it's time consuming, but making a game isn't about making a game. It's about coming up with the ideas and what's going to make it fun. And the fact that we were bouncing builds back and, like, we didn't even have Unity collab, we were bouncing builds back to each other and like, right, wait for this to upload, someone go and make a brew. And it's like, bouncing both and being like, hang on, this doesn't feel right. We need to turn up the juice a little bit on this. And it's like, this gun, like when you shoot it, it should like kick you back a bit. This gun's fucking massive. You need to like, this needs to feel meaty. And I was like, yeah, maybe we should do some camera shake. And like I was saying during the jam, like I watched a TED Talk thing of someone like how to do camera shake in games for like maximum juice. And it was all of the fucking stuff that we just figured out because it was like, this doesn't feel right. What can we do differently?
You're on mute there, Nis.
You're on mute.
Hello, boys. One of the things that I find really funny about like Latvian, it's so fun to talk about Latvian compared to this, because that's really these are the two that Will's done. And with Latvian, like even the fact that like me and Matt never decided on pixel resolution, so the guns ended up being twice as big as the guy. What a sick decision! It's so cool. It's so much better than if we'd done it to scale.
And the fact that I didn't know to ask what size you'd intended to make them, so everything just got forward at the same scale per pixel.
So good.
Yeah.
It is interesting to bring you into a space where we do know what we're doing. Because I felt comfortable throughout most of this. Apart from that, my brain was pretty dead on day one and I couldn't get my head around the inventory. I never felt like we'd bitten off more than we could chew. I started to get a little nervous when we were getting the memory leak errors, but it all cleared up after like an hour. But at no point was I like, we can't do any of this. Like, I think, yeah, Matt, I imagine the same for you. I'm confident now that when we build up a project, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, or at the very least, you know, like you and I might have been a little bit like, if we'd done one of the things with AWS or something. But for the most part there, like when we're approaching this, it's like, oh, I know that I can make this. Like, and if I can't crack the exact version of this I want, I also know exactly how I'll scope it down.
Yeah. Like,
you just get naturally good at these things. And bringing Will into that space where you and I are confident was pretty cool. Yeah. And it's also nice that, Will, you've been on two of the most distinct projects, really, because I think like a lot of the games that we made have felt like Latvian because they've been top down, and I think Latvian and this and probably Waver are the three most distinct ones we've made, and you've been on two of those, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Latvian will always have a special place in my heart because it's like amazing. I discovered this like absolute gem, like it just came out well, and I don't know why, and it just worked, and it was really fun. And then I went off, did something, and now I'm like, sort of set myself down that path now. And then coming back to it, like, oh shit, I could actually do this. It's amazing.
Well, I hope you know that I am. You know, we were doing our like Discord coding hours.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago. I was very much enjoying that, and I want to keep that up. And I do think that it might be worth maybe do a little RC car project. Maybe that could be kind of fun.
Oh, definitely. Not until Latvian's done.
Right. So. Years then. When's Latvian done?
Yeah, but have you seen the specular shading on the barrels now? Anyway, let's get into the scene. Let's have a look.
Yeah, let's have a look at the scene, and then because I'm not sure there's much else to
scene view, pre-warning for everybody on watching this. It looks like garbage.
It's all pink for a start.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to switch to my desktop scene in OBS here. I have no idea how this is set up because I wasn't planning for this, but we'll roll with it. So,
is it going to put you in a little box that says Skyward?
It's not. We're actually just going pure Unity here, which is what I'm probably going to want to do. So that's
feels like a tutorial.
All right. So this is just our Unity window being shared. Now, first off, this is an error we were running into the whole weekend. just something to do with the new Unity pipelines not liking, I think, a default material.
Yes.
So
I think one of us somehow managed to edit the default material. I think that you should not be able to do.
Yeah. So let's get
I think
rid of that.
It's edit, yeah.
There we go.
This is fine.
The magic fix everything button. All right. So, Will, is there anything in particular you want to... Are we having a look at things that didn't go into the final game?
Can I just quickly talk about what we're seeing first? Because this was
sure.
kind of interesting, right? Getting the aesthetic decisions here. Do you want to do yourself a favour? Go into game view and just...
I've made the scene beautiful.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, the aesthetic choices here. So we were falling back and forth. I basically wanted to make the lighthouse, right? I wanted to make it in 4x3 in black and white.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that what we did was bad, actually. I think it was a pretty good compromise. They're slightly coloured. And then one of the things that I was having annoyance with is slight coloration. When we had done very little colour data, we hadn't got a good sense of what colours we would be making things in. Felt very much like a children's colouring book. So getting this post effect on the regular territory as well and oiling everything up to get these very harsh lines really worked with the harsh dithering in the pixelator. Because if you look at the edges of the floor where it gets oily, basically the transitional colors, it's almost like things are toon shaded because things just go through these
down to the oily.
Yeah, if you could kind of go
yeah, sorry, you're on a bit of a delay, but I am doing what you're talking about.
Yeah. But you can see where the highlights are, it almost has that toon shaded thing of I mean there are gradients, but they're pretty they're pretty big bands. And I think that helped a lot working with the dithering. So I was pretty happy finding that solution, I gotta say. It looks quite weird in scene view, although they're kind of pretty in its own way as well. Yeah, I think one of the things we got shafted on a little bit there was not getting the camera. That looks super tuned, that mountain range you were just looking at. But I think getting the camera not quite working with the water shader, because this also made the water shader look fucking sick. But we just couldn't line up. You can see in the corner, there's two bits where the water shader works way better. The default scene that Will's made, which you're currently selecting on my view, where the ground is a little higher and the reflections, it's there's lighting there and stuff. And then also on the very far right of the scene, I made some rocks under the water to see how it played with the terrain. Might be a little harder to find, but there's an area of water that you'll find that is just, yeah, you found it. That is just a little bit more interesting from certain camera angles. And I think again, it's just another couple hours. I think me not knowing what we were doing with the cameras also, are we doing this thing where the float camera is dynamic or whatever? And we end up getting this strange artifact where, we darken the water near the camera. I have no idea what that even is.
No, I have no idea either. I think it's something to do with shadow cast distances, but...
Yeah. Might be something to do with maybe the water shouldn't have accepted
if you
or something.
If you jump into Will's scene test or whatever, that's probably a decent place to have a look at the assets, because that's got everything in.
Yeah, good shout.
Will scene 2?
No, testing Will. Obviously.
Testing Will's patience.
No, you're testing Will right now. Click what I said.
There we go.
Also really the little things I forgot we did, the trees are fucking sick. I think that style of tree with the leaves rendered like that, I would do in a game again. And the fact that they've got the shader on them that's waving the leaves, it's so small, it looks... Yeah,
I enjoyed doing that. The Unity shader graphics, cool as hell, man.
Yeah, dude, you were good at that.
Told me about it, and I was like, I'm gonna dive in. Let's work this out. Let's get things working.
This is another one of those things where you jumped into something completely fresh and did some really cool shit with it. Water shaders are notoriously hard. I mean, I know you just effectively followed tutorials, but you did fill in the gaps and connect everything up. Yeah, and then the trees and the waving of stuff.
Yeah.
Ultimately, being able to correctly apply good shit after tutorials is what game development is, and it's fucking hard. Sink that cart. Sink that cart.
Look at me using reflection probes.
It genuinely looks sick. So yeah, there are a few assets. You made a few fish.
There it goes, into the deep.
It's so good. I mean, it's just so cool. That's a really good surface water shader.
Yeah, I was quite proud of that.
You should be, man. You did a good job. Although again, it's aesthetically very non-cogent. The foam is very clearly toon-shaded foam. Yeah. Normal map is very clearly realistic water normals from 2003.
After you started doing the pixelated post effect, so I was like, it needs to look good in that.
And it does.
The fact that it fades away.
The boot with the leg.
Yeah, you put a leg in a boot that neither of them made it in.
Devastated. Yeah, look, the depth in the water. I was so happy with that. Oh, it's gone. Never mind.
I hadn't even seen the leg bit of the boot. That's great.
So the idea with that was it was going to be one of the things that the player fished up out the water, and then like it'd pop up in front of you, and there'd be like a click here to exit the preview or whatever. But if you clicked and dragged on it, you could orbit around the object, and then you'd see that there was a leg in the boot that you wouldn't otherwise have noticed. The same with there was going to be a message in a bottle, and I've got the I think they're in the scene. There you go. There's the bottle with the message in it. And
I actually did really like the idea for this.
The message would have fallen out, and then you could have read it.
That's another one of those things that felt very true to the original idea of the game about making something that feels like a regular, like you don't realize that you can use the mechanics in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think like having the message, like being able to tilt objects in 3D to examine them is a very common trope in games since like fucking Oblivion, right? You can just like examine some of your imagery. But that being like an actual way of physically interacting with an object, fucking cool. Like you can go and examine it, and if you hold it upside down, you can rattle something around inside it and just give it enough wiggling, and you can get a fucking thing out of the bottle. Like that's cool as shit. Like why have I not seen that in a game before? That's very obviously good game design trope. I think also it's almost proof. A lot of this game is proof of good game design credo in that we're playing with a lot of existing tropes, which is sort of like evident that like you've worked out what's good, what's bad, and then found the gaps in the market almost. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of what we wrote in our like Berate manifesto that we put out on our decks and stuff. Like you're trying to find the gold left in other ideas, right?
Yeah.
And something like that, rotating an object around in examine view, which is often just done presumably so the artists can get full credit for the cool assets they make. Like you can make that into a mechanic. Like there's no reason to not extend that to its logical conclusion.
And the fact
that
you're
going to blow someone's mind.
Yeah, people aren't expecting there to be interactivity there, and then when something happens, they'll be like, "Wow!"
Yeah, something's rattling around in this bottle, like a little like, gem or whatever, and you can get that out. Like that would have been fun, cool. And yeah, doing that as a way of getting our story to happen.
Yeah. The depth shader, by the way, the whole reason for wanting to get, like, because we could have just done a semi-transparent plane, and that would have been fine, and we probably could have put some texture of, like, foaminess on top, and that would have been fine too. The whole point of the depth, and it was like, I was way scoping down the line, was that at the end of the game, there would be, like, the camera rumble, and the Cthulhu would emerge. But you'd see it fading out of the depths before it surfaced, and that was what I was trying. Like, it needed to be able to do that, but that never made it in.
No, that would have been so fucking cool. So look at this scene, eh? This is how it all started. This was my day one. Bunch of assets pulled off of the interweb.
This is staying magenta, apparently.
This one's just magenta. I think this is actually, I chose this magenta. I think it was nice shade.
First pass art style.
Yeah. White on magenta.
The magenta box.
I mean, we smashed it ultimately, I think, in a lot of ways.
I didn't realise that I'd accidentally just copied your white box rocks and trees. I haven't even seen those when I'm
No, it's almost like the default way to make like poly rocks and trees. It's good that you just fall into like the good habits. I used Pro Builder on that path there. Never used Pro Builder before.
I don't know what that is.
It's a little Unity modeling tool. I just wanted to make a path and I didn't want to have to export all this out to Maya.
No fair.
So.
I'll quickly show the 3 kinds of fish, I guess. Inventory, is it in this one? So yeah, here we go. Ignore the white ones, but so the only one actually in the game is this boy.
It zooms in on it.
I like the long boy. The fat boy is very clearly a scaled up version of the. I mean, I know long boy is too, but fat boy it really shows.
But the fact that they have different dimensions in the shop is kind of fun.
A lot of them have flipped normals because I don't know what I'm doing.
Have they got holes in the bottom?
The other side of the purple one has problems.
Our main character has 2 holes under his arms.
I spotted that. I didn't want to say anything.
Reach for the sky.
I'll probably flip this back over to us now.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say our last words on the thing, I guess, because I mean, I think this is ultimately a pretty good way to. So sometimes we do predictions for scores. I think we do try. I think we aim to score in this. I do want to get a score. I think it's really cool to have the numbers there. I think this will be our lowest scoring game since Thresh.
Yep, probably. I'm not sure whether I would necessarily even put predictions on this one, just because I genuinely have no idea how this could be anywhere, right? Because this is in the 80% of the like the 20-80 split. I forget what you actually call that, but like the bottom of the pack is a muddy mess of scores.
Yeah.
There's no meaningful like being in place 2000 is not different really than being in place 3000 for any given category. So,
well, but because it's mechanically incomplete, I think that there are still things you can win points on. It's not aesthetically incomplete, and the sound is good. Like, if we were not in the 80, I also have forgotten the word you mean, but if we weren't in that mess, we would score well on graphics and sound, I think.
Yeah. I think everything will get dragged down because it's not a complete game, but
yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, the games that win are not always the prettiest. You know, the game that win number one graphics is often not the prettiest game. It's just the game that everyone played.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever have a look in the sounds folder? I spent like a good hour and a half filling that up with stuff that I thought we might end up using.
Oh, did we not use it?
There was loads of there was quite a few things that was going to. Let me find the folder. I'll tell you.
There's a few minutes. There's like a 10-minute Atmos track that I put in there that I don't know.
Just in case. Didn't end up being useful.
Actually, I've got two sounds on my desktop right now called water lapping, which I think you'd already done, so I didn't put it in, and then ambience forest by lake, wind and leaves, birds too, which I think might be in the game.
Some of the other things that like were totally unnecessary, like every footstep sound had 6 or 7 variants. Like casting the fishing rod had 3. Every water drop or water swirls that were going to play when you got the fish out at the end, everything had a couple of different variants. And every time they were played, it picked a random one and pitch bended it.
That's good sound design, dude.
All of those extra little bits of polish that like you don't realise are going on, but it just ties it all together when you play it. No, it's a broken mess.
I think for the game, for the sound in this game specifically, I think you do feel it. I think the effort that was put into the sound in this one shows, which is good, because again, I guess with sound design, often you can polish quickly because it's usually pretty low scope, right? Yeah, you already have a lot of the stuff in there. You're tying stuff into animation events that already exist. It's usually very drag and drop, and then if you want to get fancy with it, that's only adding another couple hours of dev time sometimes, and you can get away with it. Yeah. So I think in this game it shows that the sound is one of the more complete things in the game.
Yeah. Let's have a quick look over at chat before we close up. Hey Eva, hey Tess, hey Bioplay. Bioplay asks, do we plan on finishing it?
No. It's not to say that this idea is dead in the water forever, no pun intended. But I do think that it's a shame that we didn't really get. I think maybe it's almost weird if we'd finished the version of Fishy Lake that we wanted to finish. If we had another 2 days of development time, I'd probably say we never come back to this. We did it justice because it hasn't been done justice. I would be curious.
Yeah, I wouldn't write it off.
Definitely. I do think like there was so much mileage in like so many of the like cool things that you were just going to discover, and it was going to be delivering such quirky story beats. And it's not like rocket science. It's nothing that's not been done before, but it was going to be done in just such a slightly unexpected way on the background of this quirky, like childish-looking fishing game, and it was just going to be dropping like insidious things in. Like I really do appreciate that sort of thought process and that story development. I really do like that.
Even though there are a couple games like Pony Island and Doki Doki and stuff like that, they are all games that inevitably devolve into the weirdness. And I do love the idea that there's a game that, speaking outside of LD scope, a game that could come out and could be treated very, mediocre reception online, and then 6 months down the line, a forum post pops up with someone saying, do you guys think there's something kind of weird going on in this game? And then people start working out that actually there's like dark secrets to it. I think that's very cool.
I can imagine this game in probably more akin to something that you and I would have had in the original form, where it's just a bunch of menus and it's a very cute looking mobile game. Like I can imagine this as a thing that looks like a mobile fishing game that is actually covering up some like dark shit.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine doing a very different version of this that still has a core mechanic. I also like the original, like we had a pitch deck that we took some stuff from, and like in that one, it's like if we were going to go for PC, and I had a pretty cool fishing mechanic laid out that I think would make for a good fishing game. Full stop.
Yeah.
You could maybe try and make something like that. But also, there's a few genres that I think you and I wanted to hit. Like, I think we still wanted to make a racing game. Like, we were saying, like, driving should be fun. And I think actually doing something like a fishing game probably kind of been on my, like, bucket list of, like, we should give that a go. I think mechanically what you made is pretty cool. Like, obviously, it's just super incomplete. Like, you would have wanted to do more stuff even within the central mechanic that you would have never pitched. But, like, I like that ring being able to contract or expand, all these upgrades that we could have put on. Like, the different fish doing different things, maybe having, like, different movement patterns that you'd be like, oh, I know how this fish is going to go.
Yeah.
He's going to, like, go left and then juke right. I know how to catch a fucking salmon now. They always juke right. Like, and that is also cool. But it was never going to be in our LD scope.
I think that's one of the things that going forwards, being wary of, being mindful of things when you're designing them or coming up with the ideas is. So you've got this ring that can get bigger or smaller. Do we need that? Does that need to be a core part of the gameplay? Because that's going to take play testing to decide what size is a correct size for the circle. And that's just not what you've got time for. Like, that could be a stretch goal, but, like, you need to be planning these things out, not for, and then we'll play test this until it feels right. It needs to work, and then we can come back and make it fun later.
Yeah. I think if we'd known that the scope was going to get away from us, and I don't think we did. I don't think we can beat ourselves up about it, really. We did a pretty good job. But if we'd known the scope was going to get away from us, we should have probably said, what's the coolest part of our game? And I think we would have all agreed it's discovery, not fishing.
Yeah.
We would have just gone, shaft the fucking fishing mechanic then. We'll make a cool fishing game one day. What we'll do now is the bare minimum to get to the cool bits.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons this game feels like it kind of sucks, and like as like a developer, is that we didn't get any of the bits that I think were what we're going to make this game the best version of this game. Because what we have now is a game, but it's not. None of us give a fuck about a fishing game, right? Like a game where you fish and sell the same fish to a guy.
Yep.
Like none of us would play that game. And I think maybe we should have just drilled down early on. Like, okay, if we're going to do a jam, and probably a lot of this came down from, and I genuinely think this is true, Matt, that you and I had an idea of this game that was bigger. And we're like, no, because in order to sell how punchy that would be, you need to be tricked into thinking you're playing something else.
Yeah.
And I still think that is true for the big version of this game. But for LD, that can't exist.
Right.
So you go, well, what do you need them to experience in order to think this is fucking cool? Like, they need to be tricked for 5 minutes. You know, like with Waver has a reveal where you see 26 characters and it says press E and you go, okay. And then after a few seconds, you're like, oh, it's my fucking keyboard! Right? Like, Fishy Lake needed about that much. Maybe a few more minutes of just being like, what is this, a fishing game? Oh, fuck, something's happening. That's cool. And I think that would have been enough for a game jam.
Yeah. There's also some things for, like, in order to get that priority, like, we ended up feeling bad about this because all of the things that we said and we got excited about, we then put them in a list, and once they're on paper, there's no excitement tied to each one. I feel like there needs to be some way of documenting, like, and we all thought this was a good idea.
Like, it's kind of true.
Like color grade, like a color scale or something for like, and this has to be in because we all thought this was great.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Like managerially, just like I feel cool in it. Like looking back at the game today, I was fucking bored shitless at the end of the like I was drinking, I was gone. I knew as soon as I knew we weren't going to finish it. About 4 hours before the deadline, 5 hours before the deadline, I tuned out pretty fucking hard. Coming back now, I don't think I actually am proud of us. Like, genuinely. Like, I sent you guys a text at the end of it being, like, really proud of us. I wasn't. Like, I am now, genuinely. Like, I look at what we made, and I'm like, dude, we're fucking good at this shit.
Sincere bastard.
I was just aware that I'd been a negative Nancy for, like, 4 hours, and I was trying to save face. But, like, but now, looking at it, like, dude, that's kind of sick, man. Like, so much of this ties together so well.
We had some cool beats.
We made something cool. We just didn't make a game.
Yeah, and it's also exciting to say. I really like that in the buried things canon. There's another like one of the things that I remember. Me and Matt did a pitch for the London Games Accelerator. We were showing some stuff off, and some of the feedback we got is on our games page of our like slides with a bunch of GIFs, and it was like you guys have a very like incogent aesthetic, like an inconsistent aesthetic. Like you guys have made a bit of everything. It looks like. And I you know I agree for like the pitch probably not great to sell to a publisher. But I was really proud of that. I was like, yeah, we are like comfortable and excited to have a stab at everything.
Yeah.
And also, it's what keeps me on my toes. Is like, I don't think me and Matt play any racing games really, but I'd be so excited to make a racing game. Like, I wouldn't play a fishing game, but this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to have a go at all of this stuff. And like, I think that this is another one of those things where like, one day on my deathbed, we'll look back at the creative things we did and like all of the like little impacts we made. I'm like, that's cool. That one fucked up, but that was cool as shit. We spent 3 days just grinding at that. The whole team. That's cool.
Yeah. Maybe the moral of the story is if you're going to make a fishing game, have been fishing or have played a fishing game. Because we were like a number of times and we were like, hang on a minute.
There was a moment on stream where you asked Matt if he'd ever been fishing and he just took like a full 20 seconds to reply. She's like, is that what I was?
Oh yeah, you know, when the fish swims up and eats the float.
What do you mean on hook? Anyway, boys, listen, it was a fucking privilege. Let's do it again.
I'm looking forward to the next one, guys.
Yeah, 6 months, give it away.
For Ludum Dare 49 in October, November kind of time, we'll be back. So yeah, thank you for watching, everyone. And Will is included in buried things now.
I'm just one of the buried things.
Yeah.
You are a thing that we buried in.
And then on Earth, 6 years later.
For this one.
See you later, game.
See you, folks.
Bye, folks. Thanks for watching.
Bye.